Good afternoon. The Committee on General Government Operations, Appropriation, and Housing is now called to order. For the record, today is Friday, June 26, 2020, and the time now is 1:11. Notice for this budget hearing was disseminated via email to all senators and all main media broadcasting outlets. First public notice was issued on Tuesday, June 16, 2020, and the second notice was issued on Wednesday, June 24th. The committee will hear and accept testimonies on Bill 282-35, the Fiscal Year 2021 Appropriation Act, as requested by the governor, relative to the Guam Academy Charter School. Fiscal Year 2021 budget request. Joining me for this budget hearing is Vice Speaker Talina Nelson, is also the oversight for the Charter School Council, Senator Sabina Perez, Senator Kelly Marsh, Taitano, and Senator Moylan. The conduct of this budget hearing shall be as follows. Those testifying on behalf of the agency or the council will be recognized by myself, and you have been recognized. You will identify yourself later on. Written testimony shall be submitted to the committee. Please provide my legislative staff with your written testimony for photocopying. Testimony may be read, and lengthy testimony should be summarized. Testimony shall be confined to the substance. I ask my colleagues and the panel, be reminded, we're here to discuss 2021 budget. We may discuss a little bit of 2020, but the gist of this hearing is for 2021. Individuals will be allowed to present oral testimony. Once you're done, you are asked to remain in the room for questions or for additional testimony as may be desired by the members of the committee. Proper form and decorum shall be practiced by all present in the public hearing room for these proceedings. Individuals who fail to maintain proper form and decorum may be restricted from providing oral testimony and or may be asked to leave or be escorted/removed from the room. When you speak, please make sure that the microphone is on and that you speak into the microphone. You will please state your name and title for the record. At this time, I ask the panel members from the Guam Academy Charter School to rise and for the Sergeant Arms to please swear them in. Thank you, Sergeant Arms. I will now ask the panel to please identify themselves and their titles and to begin their testimony for the Guam Academy Charter School Council.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Half a day to Chairman St. Agustin and the honorable members of the 35th Guam Legislature. My name is Jesse Kenga. I'm the chairman for the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council, and I'm joined by
Mary Grace Adrosa from Department of Administration. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we may begin with our second page provided to you as a handout, our mission for the Guam Academy Charter School. So the Guam Academy Charter Schools Act of 2009 is enacted to provide opportunities for teachers, parents, guardians and students, and community members to establish and maintain schools that operate independently from the Department of Education as a method to improve student learning, increase learning opportunities for all students, encourage use of different and innovative teaching methods, create new professional opportunities for teachers, and provide parents, guardians, and students with expanded choices in the types of educational opportunities that are available within the public school system. Moving to the next slide, which is our organizational structure. The charter schools are chartered through the Guam Academy Charter Schools Council, which I serve as the chairman for the council. We have 4 other members. Our vice chair is Evangeline Cepeda, secretary is Yuka Oguma Artero, treasurer is Jennifer B. Sanchez, and a member is Celestine Babalta. In the FY 2020 budget, we receive administrative support through the Department of Administration, through Mary Grace Adrosa, the General Accountant Supervisor at DOA, joining me today, and Jemima Razo, Accountant 1, who is dedicated to the council and the charter schools. The council has afforded charter to 4 schools, and I'll name them. The first and oldest of them, Guam Academy Charter School, followed by I Learn Academy Charter School, Science is Fun and Awesome Academy Charter School, also known as Sefa, and our newest school approved just last year, Career Tech High Academy Charter School. In the next slide, we reflect on Bill 28235 as proposed, which is a rollover budget, I believe, from FY 2020 in the amount of $10,516,500. Of note for that rollover budget is it appropriates the equivalent level of student enrollment with a per pupil cost of $6,150. Reflecting on this against the 4 existing schools, we can account that based on 282-35 as written, one of our schools would actually not be able to operate without any funding. So we have come forward with 2 proposals. The next slide is Proposal A. So on this budget digest, which was altered slightly, you'll find the appropriation category on the left column, and then Guam Academy, I Learn Academy, Sefa, and Career Tech in the blue tabs above, with the total and the So beginning with Guam Academy. In the first tab, I've indicated the fiscal year 2020 authorized level of about 740 students at $6,150 per pupil or per student. For personnel services in FY 2020, we were approved for $2.8 million inclusive of benefits. For total operations was $1.14, and for total utilities was $240,000. There was a capital outlay that was required of the school, which may not have been, appropriated within FY 2020. So if you proceed to the bottom of the page, you'll find the total expenditures amount to $6.2 million in FY 20, with an appropriation of $4.5 million, leaving a negative balance of $1.7 million. There are a total of 92 FTEs for Guam Academy Charter School. For FY 21, the council had approved each of the schools for an increase in student enrollment based on the available facility capacity, as well as a slight increase in the cost per pupil, which is reflected there at $6,500. The adjusted amounts based on what was approved, at least on the council level, was a total personnel budget of $3.2 million, which reflects an increase of $389,000, which you can find to the immediate right of that number. Operational costs, total operations amount to $1.236 million, which is an increase of just $92,000. For utilities, $276,000, with a slight increase of $32,000. There is a continuing capital outlay cost, and then reflecting on the total expenditures, which now amounts to $6.2 million, which is a negative $78,000 difference from the year prior. Guam also proposes to increase their FTEs, if funded fully, to 99, a difference of 7. Moving on to the next blue column or tab, which is I Learn Academy. In FY 2020, there was $6,150 per pupil with a maximum of 620 students. The total personnel services amounted to $1.63 million. The total operational costs amounted to $2.18 million, which provides a grand total of $3.8 million. that was equal to what was appropriated to the school. Therefore, there was no negative balance for iLearn Academy. iLearn Academy also has 50 FTEs in FY 2020. In FY 2021, what is requested is an increase in student population from 620 students to 740 students, as well as an increase in cost per pupil, which is $6,500. The total personnel services amounts to $1.89 million. The total operational cost is $2.9 million, which brings the grand total to $4.8 million for iLearn Academy. There is no anticipated increase in the FTEs for iLearn. The increase in the cost per pupil was allocated to their facilities through their contract, as well as additional required equipment. For the variances for iLearn, you'll notice that there was just a slight increase in the personnel and for the total operations. Total increase from the FY 21 request compared to the authorized FY 20 level is $997,000. For the third school category, Science is Fun and Awesome, also known as Sefa, Academy Charter School. In FY 2020, they were authorized for a student population of 350. Their total personnel services amounts to $823,000. Total operations is $1.279 million, with utilities at $49,000, bringing us to a grand total of $2.152 million. Sefa has 29 FTEs in FY 2020. Compared to this year's budget requests, Sefa will retain its enrollment cap at 350 students, but with the slightly adjusted cost per pupil, which is now reflected at $6,500. I just bring your attention to the variance column, which reflects that the increase is primarily just in the personnel service column, which is at an amount of $136,000. If approved at this funding level, Sefa would like to recruit an additional 2 FTEs, bringing their total FTEs from 29 to 31. Career Tech High Academy was not in existence for FY 2020. Therefore, there was zero appropriation for that school and no FTEs. But for fiscal year 2021, our request is for 200 students at $6,500 per pupil, which amounts to $588,000 total personnel, $683,000 for total operations, $23,000 for utilities, which brings the total expenditure to $1.295 million. If you multiply 6,500 times the 200 enrollment capacity, the total amount is $1.3 million. So the school is budgeting less than the total that they're eligible for based on their requested enrollment. And I bring your attention to the far right column, which is the total, amounting for all 4 schools at $6,500 per pupil. The total personnel cost amounts to $6.6 million. The total operational cost is $6.09 million. Total utilities is at $348,000. A capital outlay for 1 school at $1.495 million brings the grand total expenditures at $14,594,817. All the FTEs combined from our 4 schools brings us to 195 FTEs. And that is the request that our schools are asking for in FY 2021. But we're very cognizant about the revenue projections for the government and anticipating perhaps a greater demand from parents who once had afforded their children to private school education that may not necessarily be able to do so again in the upcoming fiscal year. Our charter schools were asked to prepare for what was the maximum student enrollment that their facilities could maintain, which I bring your attention to Proposal B, which is our last slide. So you'll find that there are, first, the charter school, which is our first column, followed by indication for the FY21 enrollment, an appropriation at $6,500 per pupil, and these amounts are reflective of what I just presented to you. But immediately to the right of the appropriation of $6,500 per pupil, you'll see maximum enrollment. So this is the maximum that our facilities can sustain should we anticipate an increase in enrollment. And then that follows the appropriation at the existing cost per pupil, which is $6,150. So for Guam Academy, which is reflected first, Guam requested in FY21 900 student capacity at $6,500 per pupil, which brings our total to $5.8 million. But we can also see that if the cost per pupil was to sustain at $6,150, that cost would be slightly less at $5.535 million. For iLearn Academy, what I stated earlier was a 740 student enrollment cap, which amounts to $4.8 million. iLearn Academy has the capacity to increase enrollment up to 900 students, which at the existing cost per pupil will bring their request to $5.535 million. For Sefa, their FY21 enrollment request was 350. At $6,500 per student is $2.2 million. Sefa can accommodate up to 500 students, so at the existing cost per pupil amount, it reflects a $3.075 million. Career Tech High Academy, their maximum capacity is 200. So the appropriation, if approved at $6,500 per pupil, would be $1.3 million, or if it is sustained at $6,150 per pupil, would be at $1.23 million. So the differences between Proposal A and Proposal B is reflected at the bottom, which is our total. Under Proposal A, the total charter school request would be $16,010,000. Under Proposal B would be $15,445,000. So this is what we have presented to you. We understand that either of these scenarios presented to you, we are highly capable of addressing the needs of our community with providing them excellent charter school education. And now I'd like to open up the floor, Mr. Chair, back to you, should you have any questions for us.
Thank you, Jesse. I got a few questions. How much COVID federal assistance will assist the charter school, being that you'll be sharing part of the 41.5 that was approved by for GDOE? How much is going to be shared with the charter schools?
Mr. Chair, that amount has yet to be determined, but our charter schools have submitted all requests to the Department of Education. As I understand it, the Department of Education had requested our schools provide them with enrollment levels as of February 2020, and that their appropriate budget narratives be submitted. So we have sent requests to the schools who are eligible, which are just the existing schools in fiscal year 2020, and those are being provided to the council. We can provide the committee a copy of what was submitted to us for your records. We also like to make mention that Career Tech High requires a lot of startup support, but because they were not existing during FY 2020, they were ineligible for any ESF funds. So Career Tech High would probably need some special attention to receive equitable support that our existing schools had received.
You're saying they need startup support?
As I understand it, the school indicated a number of areas that require financial support. I believe their facilities need to be adjusted to maintain social distancing requirements as well as their ability to deliver education online. And they've outlined for the council. We have yet to review that as a body, but we are
All right.
aware of such requests.
Well, when you get it, then you share it with us, then we'll consider it.
Absolutely,
All right.
Mr. Chair.
Next question is, how is the transition separating from the oversight of GDOE when it comes to the budget when we're always packed together with DOE? How's the transition been?
Sure. First, I'd like to say from the council's point of view, it was rather seamless. I'd like to say that, as mentioned in earlier hearings, we were very pleased with the level of support afforded to us by the Department of Administration. And I can speak to the service we have encountered through Ms. Mary Grace, who's beside me. But as to the actual operational activity, I think I can defer that question to Mary Grace, can talk about that.
All right. Ms. Sardrosa?
Well, I believe midway into fiscal year,
Can you move the mic closer to you so we can hear you, ma'am?
last fiscal year, sir, there was a transition of the validation of requests from the charter school, from GDOE to now to DOA. So with DOA's role in the review of the payment requests, we only validate based on actual invoices that are submitted to our office, as compared to what GDOE used to do when it was being audited by them. So they do a more thorough audit. They look at procurement and other things that are not mentioned in the law. So with DOA's role, we just specifically follow what the law states. So the timing is a lot quicker in getting the payments out to the charter schools.
All right. It's good. Just follow the law, and it keeps everything simple. You know, there's no need to read into the law. Anyway, moving along, could you please, Jesse, or either one of you can, what is the current enrollment right now per charter school? We'll start with GAC. You had the enrollment, remember you mentioned you got
Yes,
it in
Ms. Grace
February or
will have
whatever,
that.
because the COVID pretty much closed everybody. So what was their enrollment?
The enrollment right now. Okay. The most recent enrollment we have for Guam Academy is 740, which is the max. iLearn is at 621, and the maximum is 620. For Sefa, it's 242, and maximum is 350.
Okay, going back, you said iLearn it's there.
The enrollment right now is 621, but based on the law, the maximum is 620.
Okay, I just want to make sure we're consistent with how the law is written. Okay, and you need to advise them. You guys are the council. You let them know where they stand. Now on okay, and we're looking at an additional 200 more students because of the career tech, right, Jesse?
That's correct.
Okay, you know, I did communicate with you because I think a lot of folks actually took it out of context when we discussed this last year. They thought that career tech, they thought maybe that I was actually not allowing them to open up. No. When the law was passed, that was introduced by Senator Moylan, am I correct?
That's correct.
It was very clear when we passed that law, they would not be granted automatic approval. That was clear in the law. And I
That's
think
correct.
you guys took the process of accepting the application and then approving them. Am I correct?
That's correct. So we had
Okay.
advised the school that they needed to appear again before the council to entertain their charter request, which we did vote in the affirmative and approved for their startup in starting school year 2020 to 2021.
Okay, and when are we looking at the charter schools are going to start up?
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I didn't quite
When,
catch
when,
the
when is
question.
when is the charter school gonna start their first day? When's their first school day?
So all charter schools were recently made aware that they needed to provide a reopening proposal to be approved by Department of Public Health prior to us announcing the school start date. So our schools are actually engaging right now in drafting those plans to be submitted for approval. You might be aware that the Guam Department of Education is nearing their completion. I think the news just came probably a few days ago. So although we're behind, but I think we're hitting the ground running, trying to get those plans in order for the schools to open up.
All right, I'm just worried that if the schools are not ready to open up, the 3 charter schools today continue to receive funding. So I'm just concerned, and I'm just curious, has the council visited all the charter schools to make sure that whatever they're supposed to be doing throughout when COVID hit, that they are doing what they need to do to make sure students are learning?
I can attest that personally I've visited all the schools. As far as the council's interaction, every time we have our monthly meetings, that is a standing agenda item for us to discuss both what are the requirements and expectations as provided in the law, as well as any additional issues or findings that the council specifically would like to look at. I think of importance, obviously, is accreditation. That is of the utmost importance for us as a council to ensure compliance. We understand that most schools are either compliant or nearing compliance, and we're happy to share news as soon as we get confirmation of such.
Such as, I think, Guam Academy received their accreditation from,
Cognia, sir.
there you go.
Yes, we're very pleased and excited to hear of the news of Cognia affording them with accreditation. Although we have shared with the school that per their initial request to establish charter, as well as their renewal request approved in 2018, the school had indicated WASC as the appropriate accrediting body. So currently the council is entertaining an amendment to their petition that would replace WASC with Cognia. So we're still, I guess you could say, pending with that regard.
Would it be wise to say that the council should maybe adopt that it should allow the acceptance of whichever appropriate accreditation council should be allowed, or do you want the application to state it? I mean, because you guys control that.
Right, exactly. So I think the law is rather strong in its wording. All schools within its establishment request would have to identify, among many things, facilities, enrollment capacities, curriculum, and most importantly, accreditation. So what we're saying is, for the case of Guam, we all understood and the council had accepted their proposal to have WASC. We're hoping that the council will be able to entertain again their request to amend it from WASC to Cognia. But as it stands, I can only speak on the record for what is existing, and the school is mandated to WASC.
Understood.
Yeah.
Now, do you know if I asked you about when the COVID hit, were they teleworking or doing online classes? Or what were they doing? I'm unfamiliar with what they were doing.
Sure. I can speak to when schools had initially closed, as charter schools did close along with GDOE. There were various initiatives to allow for our students to continue to receive their course assignments. Some schools were rather equipped with already technology such as iPads, that they were able to distribute that information seamlessly. And in order to account for students that did not have the access to internet, there were other means provided to them, such as flash drives that they could pick up on campus and return to their appropriate instructors the following week.
All right, and I noticed that on your presentation, you identified enrollment for each charter school. You identify maximum enrollment. What's the basis of that, Mr. Jesse?
We asked the schools to take into account what was the full capacity of their facility with maintaining the social distancing requirements. So we actually have plans from various schools of how a mock classroom might be set up to deliver that. And I'd like to also mention that the schools have been indicating to the council their intent to adopt an AB schedule. It's a modified schedule that allows the first half of the population to be on campus and then the second half of the population to follow.
So you don't have that yet?
We do have records. I think, Mr. Chair, if there's something specific that you're asking, we can provide that as well.
The reason why I'm asking this, Jesse, is this: number one, you have maximum enrollment. I'm gonna straight up. No A and B. Does each of these charter school have the capacity to fulfill a maximum enrollment? Does Guam have 900? Does iLearn have 900? Does Sefa have 500? Not the A and B. It's what is their capacity? Because at the end of the day, if we didn't have COVID, whatever can fit will fit. Okay, so if you have to remember that all this budget was all pre-pandemic. Do they have the capacity to fulfill their maximum enrollment? That's my question. I want to make sure it's a fair question, okay?
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Very simply, the answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. I'll now ask the Oversight Chair, Madam Vice Speaker, Senator Talina Nelson, ma'am, for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I think perhaps if I'm reading into this request of the current enrollment, there is a concern because of the lack of revenue. And so if they're only able to enroll a certain amount of students or pupils, and we're increasing it by 200 or 300 pupils, then that's going to impact how much is appropriated. And so I think the chair is concerned that now if we're going to enroll at 6,150 per pupil with the maximum enrollment that you informed the charter schools to submit, that's way over the amount that we appropriated them for last year. And so really the question is, will they be able to reach those numbers? Because then it becomes a balancing act, because we're removing students from GDOE into the charter schools, and it's known that at Guam Department of Education, it costs per pupil about $11,000 to include operations and funding and utilities for GDOE. So then we have to offset that cost. And then also it's a lot cheaper to send them to a charter school. I do have a question about the utilities for, I think it was you mentioned for GACS in their appropriation. They spent over $200,000 in utilities. Is that correct?
That was what was reflected on their budget request. That's correct. So GACS, unlike iLearn, for example, iLearn's utilities are included in their 8+ contract, which is the vendor that provides their facility. So GACS will, as I understand it, occupies government-owned facilities, but would be required to pay for utility costs.
Is this utility cost going to increase with the student enrollment?
No, because it's the existing structure. So whether the student capacity is approved at 900 or 740, we're still utilizing the same footprint. So the costs we can anticipate will also be the same.
Okay, thank you. In the elementary education, you have 24 teachers, and then you have 15 teacher assistants. Where will this enrollment be impacted if you increase it to 900?
So again, that would be dependent on how the school identifies for us their AB scheduling. If the school informs us that they might need to pursue an ABC scheduling, which I would like to say is unlikely, then there would need to be some type of abilities for administrators within these schools to recruit additional teachers or teaching assistants to make up for those students. One instructor, if I could provide this example, can assist with Block A, Block B, but if we were to incorporate a Block C, then that instructor would be overworked. We would need to provide for an additional instructor to provide that support for the third class of students.
Is there a teacher assistant in every classroom? Is that why there's 15 teacher assistants?
For that particular school, I can request that they're outside, Mr. Chair, if you would like to ask specific questions related to the school. But as I understand it, the teaching assistants are spread for the entire campus. They might be identified for specific grade levels, but I'm not certain as of this point if it's for the entire campus.
Okay. There's also been a step forward that we discussed about Cognia accreditation. There's concerns about the validity of that accreditation, and is the council in agreement that Cognia is a valid accreditation for GACS?
Although I'm just one member, I think it's rather premature for me to state whether that is an acceptable accrediting body or not.
Because they're up for renewal in a couple years, no?
You are correct, Madam Vice Speaker. So what the council has done is we've asked for GACS to provide us with what were the deficiencies outlined with WASC, and we'd also like to compare what are WASC accrediting standards compared against Cognia accrediting standards. So I can assure you that the council's doing its due diligence to review that thoroughly before we decide if Cognia is a suitable replacement for accreditation compared to WASC. We've yet to make that determination, but it is on our agenda to be heard at the upcoming meeting, which I plan for the following week.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. The proposed per pupil rate, they have 3 requests in their original budget request. They have the $6,150, which is most likely what the charter schools will receive. Then you have $6,500 and $7,500. And they make some kind of annotation saying that it is needed, a certain piece is needed for paying off prior year obligations. And so last year, they had enough money to pay out the vendors. And the previous year also, because they didn't reach their enrollment cap, they were anticipating to receive some kind of lapse rollover. And so the concern is that, are we going to, in the appropriation, going to allow them to keep this, if we do move forward with this 900 current enrollment, and if they're not able to enroll, they're going to keep the lapse from that appropriation? Is that their intent? Or are we going to give it back to GDOE?
So as I understand the allotment process, what is appropriate is only dispersed from DOA after DOA compares the factual student enrollment numbers against what is being requested to be released, whether that's personnel costs or contractual costs. So in the case that you presented earlier, if the school were to fall below what was the adopted enrollment levels, then I wouldn't suspect that DOA would release any funds in excess of what their existing enrollment is.
And that's what I'm asking. Do the schools need that money that we appropriated for them if they do not meet the enrollment cap within the law? Because you're raising it to 900, right? So you see what I'm saying? Just like DOA only gives them an X amount according to the enrollment. But we still anticipate that we're in the appropriation that they're going to meet their enrollment. And so let's say they ask for 900 and they're only able to enroll 800, DOA won't release the other 100. So where does that money go? We don't know. What I'm asking is, do you need a provision? Does the council recommend a provision so that the schools, the charter schools, are able to utilize that money to fix whatever it is they need in their area, in their schools for that fiscal year? Or are we just going to let DOA keep it and then it will be realized somewhere else?
Yeah. I see very clearly the concern that you're raising. I can say that the council is willing to work with the Vice Speaker, our Oversight Chair, on crafting draft provisions that will allow us to examine what is the existing student enrollment and what would trigger for the level of appropriation for that school should enrollment fall below what was approved by this body. And I think that will help satisfy that large concern of whether we're appropriating too much compared to what the school actually has in as far as student capacity.
And whether or not the school would be able to utilize that money to
They
expand their
wouldn't be.
services.
I don't think they would be, because DOA again would have to confer based on the actual student enrollment. So if they're requesting to pay out an allotment request that is beyond what their student enrollment is, that would be denied, and the letter would be submitted to both the school and the council.
Right.
We'd also like to mention that we follow the schedule of DOE, right, Ms. Grace?
Right.
About the allotment schedule. So we cannot see the charter schools getting amounts in excess to what was already allotted to DOE, and that's happened already in fiscal year 2020.
That's correct. You cannot see it now, but I'm asking, if you had the opportunity to see that come into fruition, that's something that the council should discuss. The payment for the vendors, we've been going at this for 2 years. What is the status of the payment of the vendors?
All
With the-
vendors have been paid, Madam Vice Speaker.
Okay. So, just give me a
Actually,
moment.
if I can clarify, Madam Speaker, about the process. So we received the listing of vendors and the amounts owed to them.
Okay.
The council had met and approved those amounts and transmitted to Director Byrne that we would like these amounts paid out of the school's budget. The actual check was issued to the school and not to the vendor. So I can speak that the amounts approved by the council for those vendors were distributed already to the school. But I would need to confer with the school if in fact after receiving the check from DOA that they had in fact paid the vendor that it was earmarked for.
So in November 19, 2019, Department of Administration letter, what was pending allotment is Anthony P. Torres. This individual has already been paid.
I can speak that the amounts that were identified for that vendor was approved by the council and that payment amount was remitted to the school. It's the school's responsibility upon receiving that payment to disperse a check to that vendor.
Okay, Bank of Guam at the amount of $169,000, is that the same situation?
For all vendors, that is the same situation.
So you won Ludixel $243,000, that's the same situation?
Yes. There are, I believe, up to 8 vendors that were identified at our council meeting with various levels of invoices. So all those amounts were approved by the council and we had transmitted to Director Byrne to remit those payments to the school on behalf of the vendor payments.
Okay. The MSA Logistics, the Carpet Store, Rex International, the council gave that specific school that owed these vendors the money back to cut the checks out to those vendors. Is that correct?
Yes, and I confirmed with DOA that in fact all those amounts were completely remitted to Guam Academy Charter School for the purpose of paying those vendors.
Did they pay the vendors?
I will need to inquire with the school. It is my understanding that those vendors have been paid.
Okay. Yes, can we just verify?
Correct.
So we can move forward from this thing hanging over our heads.
Yes.
Has Guam Academy Charter School hired a CRT? Last year, it was a huge issue that, there were some students with curriculum that needed to be modified for their learning growth. And so have they hired a CRT to address these issues?
Now, the council's role isn't to get into the operational activity of the schools. We like to reserve our abilities to just monitor the school's academic performance against what they had proposed. But I can say that upon reflecting of their staffing pattern, I found that their chief academic officer is utilizing what resources are available and her limited staff to help perform those duties. So if you don't find that that actual position is a active funded position, then you would see that other capacities are having to make up for that difference. But specifically to CRT, yes, that individual was hired.
Okay, very good. In the contractual agreements, you have the food management provider for $504,000. Is the council directing the charter schools to see if they can get federal assistance, similar to the way GDOE gets their assistance for the free lunch program?
Yes, and we're engaged with all schools to talk about what other sources of funding are available. And to the fullest extent possible, our council remains available to providing that type of service.
Is there an anticipated date where we will see this type of grant come to realization?
As I understand it, there is one charter school grant that we're eligible for, but the cycle opens up in August.
This August?
Yes.
And what is the grant?
It's the Charter School Support Fund. It's similar to a technical assistance grant for charter schools specifically, and what's unique to this is recipients of this grant are ineligible for another award. So there have been a number of jurisdictions that have already been awarded, thus increasing the likelihood that Guam will receive one.
Is this grant written per school, or is this grant written by the council and distributed to the schools?
It's by the council. It has to be a state agency and then shared with the schools.
And what is the cost, what is the amount of the grant?
Oh, it would be in the millions, Madam Vice Speaker, but it is all dependent on what we're able to request. So that requires some discussion and collaboration with our schools to identify what is our current capacity and what are we trying to grow in as far as student support services, equipments, facilities. Those are activities that are allowable costs within this grant.
Does this include salaries for teachers or additional aides?
It would, but we're often cautious about affixing a teacher salary to a one-time grant award because the sustainability of that teacher salary would need to be reviewed and I guess accounted for in the future. But I understand that of greatest need obviously is facility. A lot of our schools, most especially our longest running school, is in need of a permanent home, and this would go into that effort of providing that if allowed by this grant.
So the grant will allow GACS to be able to build a school? Is that what
Well,
you're
it
saying?
would allow for the state agency through the council to set those priorities. So the council perhaps could, and I'm only speaking for myself, we haven't discussed this as a body, but we could, in essence, propose to set up a sort of feeder school, a school where startups can try through this facility, and then after a certain amount of years as they mature, they're asked to find their own home so that new schools can occupy the space that has been developed. But I'm happy, I can tell you that a lot of these opportunities require support and collaboration from stakeholders that also include our lawmakers, our policymakers. So as we move along this course with our council, we're excited to engage with your office as well as this body to talk about how we might affirm that support in order to get the grant award.
Okay. And the reason why I'm asking if the CRTU was hired, because now you see the GACS starting to evolve into the needs of basic life skills. So I'm thinking that we do have students in this particular school with special needs. And so this is basically setting up a house, and you even have procurement for twin-size beds, living room sets. Is this realistic?
Well, it's part of the curriculum. So to answer your first question about the coordinator, yes, the coordinator was hired. So I'm hoping that the efforts of that job specification will allow the school to provide assurances not just to the council but also this body.
Okay. You have, now we'll go over into Sefa. In Sefa's budget, they're asking for a new teacher salary hired from the Philippines at $55,673. Just the question is what is the purpose of this high of a salary? All the other teachers are getting paid like about $30,000. Is there a reason why the specific teacher is going to be paid $55,673?
So I reserve any comment because typically the Board of Trustees are entrusted with that type of review and administration of their schools. So it is the Board of Trustees' responsibility to account for what is their full anticipated expense for their school, as well as what revenues are made available to them. If the school finds them in a bad position because they've overspent compared to what is anticipated to come in, then that is a negligence on the Board of Trustees and not the council. But obviously we can open up those conversations, although I don't believe that it's proper at the council level to have those kinds of discussions with our schools. The Board of Trustees for each of the schools have that primary responsibility.
I know, but you're the council coming here asking us for money with the current enrollment increased by 200 or 300 pupils, students, right? So I think it would be, if you're paying for the salary of $55,673, we don't know the credentials, we don't know the purpose, and it almost equals the amount to hiring 2 teachers if you would consider the FICA and all the other benefits attached to that.
Yeah, I
So
don't.
we can, I don't know, I think, I think it's very appropriate to ask the question at the board level with the schools, what is the purpose? I mean,
don't
I
disagree
don't
with you,
think you
yes.
could say, no, you're not going to do that, but I think it's very prudent if we understand why.
Sure.
And then career tech, they're asking for retirement benefits for 7 teachers is $9,934 each. 5 CTE, $4,021. The principal's $15,847. This is just for their FICA, and their vice principal is at $11,642. And I don't see in their budget, I don't see a specific staffing pattern to really get this school going. And they're asking for their enrollment, what is the amount that they're asking for?
200 students.
They're asking for 200 students.
Yes, they did provide us with a proposed staffing pattern that identifies the specific positions they aim to fill that amount to the 15 FTEs. But as far as occupants or existing employees, I'm only aware that the Board of Trustees had retained just a principal to help facilitate a lot of this planning. But no educator, as far as I understand, has yet to be recruited.
Okay, and then in iLearn Academy, you have a teacher increment of 1 year for 1 teacher. That increment was $10,943. What was the purpose for this, I guess, high level of increment for 1 individual?
I imagine that the schools would have their own process in which they review perhaps the educator had received some type of credential or accreditation certificate that will enable them to receive an increase or salary adjustment that is commensurate of their experience and academic achievement.
Okay. Mr. Chair, that's all the questions I have, but Mr. Chairman, we're going to ask that we get information about how the charter schools are going to, same thing that we're doing with DOE, how they're going to open up the schools, what federal grants they're availing to or looking to avail to, and then the processes that are going to need to be implemented because of COVID. And I understand that we're already we're all looking at GDOE because GDOE received the $41 million, but we're forgetting that so did the executive branch for the purposes of education, got that 12 million roughly, right, Mr. Chair, from the US DOE. And so we need to see really if it's the way that this money is spread out, it benefits all children, and it's not partial to which agency has the greater political pull, right? And so we want to make sure that we do what is right for the students in this manner. So just anticipate a roundtable discussion coming up within this budget season, and then we can move forward from there. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice. Jesse, I got a simple question for you. I see you got the maximum enrollment for each of the group. I'm just surprised that the council hasn't considered maybe a phase of increase of students. Okay, you got 740 to 900. Really? And just a note of caution. When we appropriate the money, you don't decide, and neither does DOA decide how much they get. No. This council identifies what their allotment will be, and I know DOA knows this. You issue the money because if they have 900 or they have 740, it's growing to the 900. The number of teachers, and like you mentioned, the location they're at, they can fill the maximum enrollment. You can't deny them the growth, the preparation of hiring somebody, getting it all set up for the 900. So the allotment is scheduled, it's done. DOE doesn't decide, no, you didn't get 900. We're only going to give you this much. No, it doesn't work that way. The allotment appropriation is set, good as gold. I'm just very hesitant to support a straight up 900. If you came in here, Mr. Chairman, you said for Guam Academy, they're at 740, recommend 800, and maybe look forward to maybe 850 and then get up to 900. I can understand that. Growth, huh? There's got to be a phase in. I learned 620, they want to get up to 900. I see the 2021, they're looking at 740. Oh, okay, maybe another 80. I'm looking at that. I look at Sefa. Sefa's, they started without any funding to start. So it says a lot for them, but they're at 244 with an authorization of 350. You can't deny them any penny, any money. Whatever they appropriate for the 350, you got to give them everything. But I can see that if they got to the numbers of Guam and I learned, okay, let's look at a 60 or 80 student increase, right? I'll be looking forward to that round table with the Madam Vice Speaker, the Oversight Chair. When we look at Career Tech, because I'm just curious about how they set up their faculty, their administrative work. I don't look into that. Why? Because when we identify 6,150 or 6,500 per student, it's lump sum here. They cannot deny any student any education, regardless of the cost. This is what you're getting per student. So I just want a note of caution, okay? So as we looked at that possible amount, I'll be looking forward to that round table. So before we get to the final decision, but I do agree with some of the charter schools do need an increase. I've gotten calls for all three schools. They're anticipating an increase. People are leaving the private schools. They're going into either DOE or charter. So we got to anticipate that. The increase of 6,150 to 6,500 with the COVID situation we're in, we need to see where we're at financially. 6,150 is safe today. Okay? So I just give you that word of advice. Senator Moynihan, do you have any questions, sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the presentation. Jesse, I know we don't know when the enrollment will start or when school is really going to start, but if we didn't have this COVID situation, when would be your next enrollment? When would have that been planned?
So enrollment is active throughout the year.
Okay.
In fact, once we were able to open up some type of movement within our local economy, we've seen that schools have received increase from parents. I think a transition of their student from either a private school or public school into a charter school requires some processing, and a lot of parents have already initiated that. I can tell you based on Mary Grace's report that some schools are already beyond what was the limits of their enrollment or what was funded. So there is a waiting list that we have on file for some schools. So should the capacity increase, these schools are prepared to allow for their student enrollment.
Okay. Could you remind me, I remember Guam Academy when they started and they were allotted so many students, but then we had to deploy. I think there were some funding issues. Do you recall their initial enrollment? And I think we had to tell the students, you can't enroll because we cut back their budget. Do you recall the numbers?
No.
Yeah, I mean, DOA just got the file in FY 2020. I was just appointed to the council in August of last year. But I did, I don't want to say an untrue number, but we do have that information on file. I just need to retrieve it and I can provide that to you.
That's fine. I'm just thinking there was a higher amount that they initially had interested in coming in, but we had to drop that because of funding. So, for example, Guam Academy, going from that to the max of 900 from 740, that's 160 difference. So I was thinking, them and the other schools, like for example, I Learn to 740 max, that's 120 difference, and 108 difference for Sefa. Is there interest? Are these schools getting interest now? Are you getting calls from parents, you know, even though we're supposed to have enrollment happening, right? Can you give me some idea of the interest of when school opens up and the projected enrollment possibly for each of these schools, to give me some sort of, is this possible?
I mean, I can reflect back to Guam specifically. Upon their startup, they had enrollment of up to 1,000, but it was because the body did not have the ability to fund 1,000 students at the $6,050 per pupil at the time. The enrollment cap was cut to 740. I learned as well, they have an existing waiting list for students who wish to enroll at their facility, at their campus. So the schools have a great mechanism of reaching out to parents, affording them information of what their school offers. We have to anticipate that if there is a grand exodus of students from private schools transitioning into public schools, parents, if afforded the option of an overcrowded GDOE school or a charter school, chances are more likely than not they're going to select for a charter school. And we're seeing that with the numbers. There is interest growing amongst our population for enrollment at any one of our charter schools. I can say Guam Academy has a waiting list of over 100 students as of today.
Okay, and from their 740 to 900, they need 160. And so far you're saying they have 100 people waiting on top of the 740.
Correct.
How about iLearn?
I've asked for that information, and they are outside, but if you just give me a few minutes to find that out, I can share with you after the hearing if I don't have that right now.
Would you have Sefa or Sefa?
Yes, all schools are requested to provide me with their waiting list numbers, but all schools have created the interest. The only school that is different is Career Tech High, who has just now opened their enrollment for their school.
Okay. So they have realistic numbers. I mean, it's nice to wish for something, but are you saying it's achievable? That's what I'm trying to get at, right?
Absolutely, Senator. These are realistic numbers, and our schools are affirming that they have the capacity within the facility as well as their workforce to meet the demand. It's just whether or not we have the resources to support those types of requests.
Okay.
Senator Moylan and my colleagues, if you want, we can ask the chairman, Mr. Jesse, we'll take a 5-minute break. You exit and get all the information you need, and we'll come back at 2:20, and we will see the results. Okay, so that I think, unless any of my colleagues have any additional information you need to get from them, please state it now, so when the chairman goes out, because we're not bringing everybody in. We're just sticking with the 2, and that's it. We're not going to grow any larger. So, Senator Perez, do you have anything you wanted to get from the other charter schools? You might want to state it now.
Yes. So I have a question regarding Charis Funding or any kind of federal funding. Have you been able to avail yourselves of that to prepare for social distancing? Also, in regards to the GDOE, they received $41.5 million to prepare for, to help prevent the spread of COVID.
As a matter of fact, Senator Perez, Jesse, why don't we go ahead and take a 10-minute break? The senators will ask you, and you can go get it, and then we'll come back and we'll wrap it up. Okay? Thank you. We'll take a 10-minute recess. Thank you. We have returned from recess. I'm hoping that they were able to obtain all the information they need. Senator Mullen, we'll go back to you and you can continue and hopefully they have the answers for you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jess, you recall the questions? We were just talking about the proposed enrollment and the interested people, if you can, please.
Thank you, Senator Moylan. Apologies. For Guahan Academy Charter School, their max enrollment is at 740. They anticipate, or they reflected 100 plus waiting for room. For iLearn, their capacity was at 620. They have 60 students waiting, and that doesn't even factor in kinder level students who typically come around July to enroll. So that 60 figure could grow by double. So an additional 120 students waiting. For Sefa, their enrollment cap is at 350 and they're on track to reaching at least just the cap at 350. So those are the three schools that we can account for the waiting period.
Say Sefa again, please.
Sefa, yes. Their enrollment cap at 350 students. So they currently have 277 and on track to register 350 before the start of the next school year. But the two larger schools have a substantial waiting list already in place.
So Sefa is on track to reach the
maximum student
maximum
capacity, correct, Senator.
And iLearn, when they get their kinder, they have 60 waiting and they expect the kindergarten to make the other 60 to reach the 740 then.
Correct.
Okay. And then Guahan, 100 on the waiting list, so they'll be short like 60 to reach their
900.
900.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Jesse.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So Jesse, would it be safe to say they're currently 740, Guam Academy? If they were authorized 840 to meet their 100, right, their waiting list? And then on iLearn, because they're 620 and they already have 120, they said 60 and then it could jump to 120. Would it be safe to say then that, I'm trying to bring a balance, Jesse, and if you can help us by giving us what you anticipate would be a safe number. I would say maybe even 720 for iLearn.
That's correct, Senator.
Instead of 740, you know what I mean?
Yes.
And then we see what happens next year. If they meet it, they can keep it. If they don't meet it, at least they're hearing me. If I'm still the OFB, I will reduce the student enrollment because it's not going to make any sense. We're not going to be chasing after them. And Sefa's ready; they're comfortable at 350, and then we're looking at Career Tech at 200, and you're going to get back with us, right?
Correct.
All right, Senator Kelly, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Hungan and Sidus Maasi, Mr. Chair. Thank you to both of you for being here, and we've been getting good information from you. I really appreciate the questions that have been asked thus far, especially by the chair and your oversight chair. So with this, we've talked a little bit about the Guahan Academy Charter School as the only full-term school. How many graduates were from that school for the year 2019 to 2020?
Within this past academic year, they reported 15 graduates. We also have data for 2017 graduates were at 30, and for school year ending 2018 at 29, and then the recent school year 15.
And, you know, I know things, especially in a school where it's a full term like that, where it's accommodating all the way up through the 12th grade. Is there any reason why there was that differential of 30 and 29 and 15 this year?
Well, we see that their graduation rate is actually 100% from the seniors that start in August and then complete in May. What could be attributed to this would be a student that transitions to another host school. But for students that are at the senior level who start in August, it's 100% graduation rate come May.
Sujuis Masi for sharing that, and it's good to hear that for those that are there in the senior year that they make it all the way through to the end and they have a 100% graduation rate. That's very good. The other is that for the Guam Department of Education and bylaws that implement the Chamorro language curriculum, there is Public Law 31-45, which requires GDOE to implement an expansion of the language and culture curriculum for Guam. Do charter schools at this point implement a Chamorro language program? And if not, are they looking towards that?
I am aware of at least one school that has a Chamorro language program,
Which school?
Guam Academy.
Okay. And
The other schools have, sorry, Senator, not to interrupt you, but the other schools have varying missions. So Sefa, for example, is a STEAM-centered charter school, while iLearn provides for academics through technology. And that could be attributed to why perhaps they haven't yet explored how to immerse Chamorro language into those types of learning environments.
And yeah, it's something I'd like to continue pondering on because I very much understand and I really appreciate the offerings of those schools. And just seeing if it makes any sense, since we're all here, to add a little bit to their curriculum. But thank you for that information. And I believe we've talked about the federal programs a little bit, that there has been some application for grants, which is good to hear. I believe that the next senator will be asking some more about that. So I'll go ahead and pass that one. And I know we touched on renewable energy solution, and I can't remember if we talked about it in detail, but are any of the schools looking at, we've been working towards having the GDOE start to look at solar energy. Are the charter schools looking at any of this as well, or is there any ability to collaborate with GDOE as it does this that you're aware of?
That I know of to date, my answer would be no, but I would like to pose that question directly to the schools at our council meeting and provide that as testimony to the committee for your review.
Very good. And the next one is just for an update with the accreditation. So we have gotten to talk a bit about the accreditation, and thank you for that very helpful explanation of understanding it's going to be going through the council. They're going to be comparing WASC to the other type of accreditation to make sure that the council has verified everything for the Guam Academy Charter School. Can you also just give us an update about the accreditation for the other schools and what path the tech school might be going on as well?
Sure. We're very pleased to report that for iLearn Academy Charter School, they actually received WASC accreditation, which was celebrated early or late last year, rather. And for Sefa, their timeline is rather on track. I anticipate that for Sefa, we will begin the discussion with their progress for WASC accreditation. And those are the only two remaining schools other than Guam, which was shared earlier with this committee.
And For the Career Tech High Academy, do they have something listed in their proposal so that we know what accreditation they're working toward?
Yes, it's WASC as well for
It
the
is
career
WASC as
tech.
well?
Yes.
Okay. So Jose Masi, it's very good to hear that they're on track, and we'll be looking forward to the council going through the processes for the Guahan Academy and be listening for that result. So Jose Masi, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Senator Kelly. Senator Sabina Perez, do you have any questions, ma'am?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. And hello to Jesse and Maria, Josa. So just a question about the pandemic. I know a lot of this half of the school year was they had to close down for due to the pandemic. Have you seen any cost savings as a result of that?
Well, actually, I was in discussion with the schools outside about that. I can speak to iLearn Academy Charter School. They, in fact, did not close. What we saw was them changing the delivery of education from face-to-face in the classroom to distance learning. In fact, iLearn has been such a pioneer in that effort that they are actually hosting a workshop on July 6th, which was open to both GDOE as well as the other charter schools to see what a virtual classroom experience is like. And I'm really proud of ways in which our schools are leading in that area.
Okay. Was there any, would you estimate to be any cost savings if you were to do 100% online education?
It would reflect on, well, I don't know if fully online is, if that's possible. I think that the schools are anticipating to have some ability to be on campus, and that primarily comes from the expectation and demands from their parents. Parents don't wish to see their students just at home for the duration of their learning career. I think there is some demand that there be a face-to-face to keep students on track with their academics and engaged in their learning careers. But if there was a school that would go completely online, I think that there would be perhaps some ways to cost save, whether the facility usage might be reduced to such where those amounts that would normally be attributed to paying for a facility size might be de-appropriated or less than what they were planning for.
Yeah, so I'm reading this testimony in regards to CDC guidance to ensure that that schools are safe should the students return back to campus. And, you know, just hearing what you're talking about, that there's going to be maybe a double shift, perhaps, which may require additional teachers. So, yeah, in considering that we're dealing with leaner times, there has to be ways to offset those costs. Should you know, it be continued to have on-site learning. So the other question I had before we went into recess was regards to the Charis Funding. So do you have access to that in regards to put up more PPEs and cleaning the schools more and more frequently? What is the status of that?
Sure. So through the CARES Act, there was a Education Stabilization Fund, which is administered through GDOE in the amount of $41 million. 3 of our existing schools were allowed to participate and submit their requests. I do have amounts that I can report to this committee at this time. For Guahan Academy, their request was for $763,000. For iLearn Academy is for $680,000, and for Sefa Academy, $181,000. And their request primarily is to provide for opportunities for them to safely distance within their facility. And most of them, I heard from the schools, went towards plexiglass or screen guards to protect their faculty and the students from when they do need to interact.
Let's see. I think that's all for now. Yeah, thank you.
I also want to share with Senator within that same line of questioning, when we first heard about the effects of this pandemic and through the CARES Act, the Pay Protection Plan, the PPP loan was made available, we highly encouraged all our schools to submit an application for a PPP loan. And to our knowledge, we are aware of at least 2 schools that have applied. We can confirm of at least the 2 whether such an award was given to them. And that will help obviously subsidize the cost for running their facility and their educational campus.
Okay, sorry, Mr. Chair, I actually have a couple more questions, if you don't mind.
You have any other questions?
Yeah, I do.
You do?
Yeah.
Please, go ahead, continue.
Jesse, so I was looking at the proposed budget, so if you could just clarify for me some of the cost so I noticed that between the 4 schools that are listed, there's quite a range in cost for office space rental. So, with Guahan Academy and Career High Academy, there's no office space rental, but with iLearn Academy, there's a 2.8 million, so there was a jump of about 744,000. And then Sefa is 1.1 million, so with a reduction in rental cost. So is there an opportunity to renegotiate some of these leases to bring down the costs?
So to clarify the earlier statement, Guahan Academy actually does not pay for any facility usage because they're utilizing Government of Guam owned buildings. They only pay for utilities. Career Tech, although it doesn't reflect on capital outlay, they actually have their costs embedded within their contractual services. That is the amount for utilizing the facility they identified down south in Agate. So with the exception of Guahan Academy, iLearn Academy, Sefa, and Career Tech all have various leases with vendors to provide campus facilities. And then to the second question about whether those costs can be negotiated or renegotiated, those costs are inclusive of other fees such as utility costs and would need to be considerate of whether there would be a reduction based on utilization reduction. Perhaps utility costs is therefore reduced and therefore room for renegotiation might be available. But most of these schools, as I understand, are engaged in some type of term contract. It's not year by year, but perhaps there's a 5-year commitment that these schools are engaged in, and I would need to verify what those terms are. I can provide that information to the committee and what might be our outlook should we wish to renegotiate with the various contractors.
Okay, thank you. The other cost item that I wanted clarification was the equipment cost. So there's a 40,000 equipment cost request for GACS and Sefa. Is that, is there a breakdown? I didn't see it in what I received, the documents that I received. Is there a breakdown for that?
There is. We provided forms that are comparable to what other agencies are required to submit, which includes our budget digest, our Form 96A, which are all BBMR forms. They were transmitted to the committee and I believe posted on the OFB website, but I can also request that we send that directly to your office
Okay,
email.
I appreciate that, to
Will do.
see the itemization. So, and then as far as contractual services for Guam Academy, it's listed here, at least for the governor's request of 731,000 as well. If you can provide a breakdown of that as well, because I don't have that in front of me.
Sure.
Okay. Okay, I think that's it. No further questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Senator. Thank you, my colleagues. The committee will conclude this budget hearing, but let me just advise the chairman and the councils that the vice speaker, the oversight chair, has stated that she's going to have a round table last week of July, right before we go final on the budget. As the people are listening, and to the charter school personnel that are listening, because they're just right outside the door, I'm in support of the increase of the student population, okay? I'm not going to say no, but we need to keep in mind the financial status of the government of Guam. So to ask for an increase per student, we're not going to consider that. The number of students, I can see that, because there will be a movement by students from everywhere. But This will generally conclude the budget hearing for the Guam Academy Charter School Council. Committee will continue to receive testimony, and please address your written testimony to the Committee on General Government Operation, Appropriation, and Housing, and submit it via email to Senator Joe S. San Agustin at gmail.com. Tizus Masi for your attendance and participating in today's hearing. And for those at home, thank you for watching the budget hearing on Bill 282-35 LS relative to the Guam Academy Charter School Council is now adjourned. It is 2:54. And have a nice day. Thank you.